All right, we are recording. Welcome to the virtual brown bag. What day is today? Today is the 4th, February the 4th of 2021. Our favorite year so far, I guess. This is the place of the internet where we get together every Thursday, and as usual, we are recording, and we always encourage folks to share, thoughts, ideas, experiences. So whatever it is that folks are sharing, just make sure that you're not going to be sharing something that's going to cause you any kind of trouble, because this is going to get published usually the same day or the day after. And we don't have time to edit these videos later. And if we do have to do it, then it will set us back for at least by about a week until we get the video out. What is the virtual brown bag? It's a place where we get together, we share tips and tricks, we share experiences, frustrations, difficulties, maybe things that you've been working on recently. You figured out a pretty good way to do it, share with others, or maybe you didn't figure out a good way to do it. You just figured a way to do it, bring it up here. Maybe somebody else has gone through the same thing and could, give you some pointers or suggestions, things to try out. We do this every Thursday from 12 to 1 Central Time here on Skype. Make sure to invite your friends, co-workers, people who could benefit from this kind of discussion. We've been all over the map as far as topics, ranging from some like real deep technical things all the way up to like soft skills type of topics, and even like time and focus management topics like the Pomodoro technique and things like that, how to write better user stories, and so on and so forth. We have a virtualbrownbag.com website where you can always find the link to this meeting as well as the link to the previous videos. So there's links to the videos, little blurb as far as like the main topics that we talked about on each one of those, so you can check it out. And other than that, let's get things rolling. I see George joined in. What is up? Oh, I think you're on mute, man.
Hey, so
There
yeah,
you go.
I had something I wanted to bring up, and actually,
Sure.
I was talking to Jose, who's on here,
All
um,
right.
earlier about this. So he was asking, so Jose, I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I could kind of try to introduce the idea. I think you were working at a company where you build a lot of forms, and your team builds stuff to help the other teams, right? Um,
Yeah, so basically, most of what we do is build forms, and these forms are used by other technical personnel in like our division, for put it like that. And they use this information, like it's mostly like a network division, so they use this information to know, okay, do we have so many switches working right now, or just network devices, where are they deployed, what's happening with them. And most of the information sometimes are just inputted by a user filling out a form, and this form we had to build it, right? So the question that the manager was asking us this morning, if there was a way for us to build a, I don't know if that would be the correct uh, name for it, but to build a form builder, something that the user can go into a website and just lay out the question that he wants, put the type of question that he wants, for example, drop down or maybe a checkbox, and just build their own form, and it will just automatically, magically work.
so I think. Oh, I didn't mean to. So I think let's. I think that's a good topic. Let's talk form builders, because I mean, there's no way, Claudio, you don't have experience with that. I've got experience with that. Um, I hopefully I don't know if some of the other people on the call have had experience with it, but do please open up and start talking about it. So yeah, I get what you're talking about, Jose, and it is interesting, and it's the sort of thing that, especially on business apps, comes up Well, once a project, but it certainly comes up at some point. So I guess let me lay out kind of how I tend to see it going most of the time, right? Um, so you have, you have this thing where people are saying like, all right, we're just building these forms all the time. We're spending a ton of time on building these forms. Say, okay, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna make a form builder, and what we're gonna do is we'll first start out with sorry, I'm getting lost in my own thoughts. We'll start out by taking the, basically you can create a JSON document or something like that, and you can basically, I don't know, maybe you give it the text of each question, and then the type of answer, whether it's a I don't know, and the answer would be like, maybe you'll support string text answers and text areas and Boolean checkboxes, right, and numbers, right? Those are the three things that you'll support. Maybe you'll support date pickers too, right? So what do? Your JSON document is just going to be like a big array of stuff. Then for each one, and it'll have a bunch of objects, and in each object it'll have like question text and then question type, right? So the first problem you hit with that is you're like, okay, well, how do I store this in a database, right? So the most simplest, most standard way is to say, well, just take the contents of the form and dump it to a JSON document and store it there, or store it in some sort of denormalized, like just questions table and answers table. But then someone comes up to you and says, yeah, but I need a query against this stuff. So we do need the tables to have structure, right? So, previously you had like, basically you had a start date question, like a question for like, at what time did this event occur, right? Or a question, you need a column for that. You had a question for, I don't know, what's your name? You need a column for that because we're going to be querying and joining with it or something like that. Now, if you can guarantee you don't have to do that, you don't need this, and that makes it much easier. Okay, let's say you say, okay, well, fine. So part of the form builder will be that it will generate a script that will make it so that you could generate these tables, and it'll figure out which column to put everything in. So the next thing that comes up is, well, that they add something to that JSON document. Now you can generate another script for what the table should be now, but that's not enough. You need to generate a script for what happens to the old data to change it into the new structure and figure all that out. Okay, so that ends up being complex, and maybe you like punt on the whole thing, or you say like, you know what, I'm going to do like some sort of plug-in infrastructure where you can plug in your own code that does that. So the next thing that happens is people say, okay, well, we need dependencies between some of these questions, right? So for this question, we're going to be putting in, it's just going to be a checkbox question, and it'll be like, are you in New York State, right? But if they say they are in New York State, then we need to show all these other forms that they need to fill out, all these other text fields that they need to fill out, but those don't appear unless they are in New York State, and we need validation to happen on that level. So, okay, how do you hook that up in a JSON document? So you think real hard, and you end up adding like a depends field to that JSON document, where you can say here, okay, this field depends on these other fields being filled in, right? But then pretty quickly, it's like, well, it's not just filled in, it's specific values, right? So if they say they're in New York State, it's this thing, but if they say, well, they're not in New York State, they're in Louisiana State, it's this other thing. So you have to make like these cascading dependencies and eventually say, screw it, I'm gonna make some sort of plugin system where you can plug in your own code for how that works, right? and then someone asks you for controls, and they say, well, right now it's the entire form is being laid out vertically, right? So, but we don't want that. We want the city and state to go on the same line, right? But the form itself doesn't have any of the code for custom styling in it, because that's not part of your framework. So now you create a plugin system where you can write your own CSS, or you can do that. So you keep going through this process over and over and over again. And that's a big if, you manage to get all the plugin process and architecture right, where you end up with is the programming language and the web framework that you started off with. And it ends, except with a bunch of other layers on it that are way worse documented and way poorer. And that's only if you get that architecture right, which you probably don't. So you'll have like the programming language, and then like this really weird Byzantine complex layer on top of it, and then some stuff that you can sort of do, but some stuff you can't do, and some stuff you have to drop down to a lower level and hack around. So that's one of the big problems with form builders, and you've got to be really, really good and really clear on your use case to get it right. I don't know. Do you want to talk to that? Does anyone else want to talk to that a little bit more? Anyone feel I'm way off base?
I think as you were talking, I'm putting down a bunch of notes, but I would definitely, I mean, with all this input, I would love to hear from Jose, like even your input, if that changes anything on the way, like of your specific context.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I had my first question was the same one, the same one as yours. Like, how are we gonna just like store all of this in the database, and how? Okay, because we need to store not just how the form is gonna look like, but the answer of those forms. And if somebody else is using the same form, then it's gonna be like a regular table just for information created from that form, but that form itself will have its own table, which needs to be generated as you create the form. And then once you create the form, if you want to add an extra, like you say, an extra question, that's going to have to reconsider everything again from not just the table for that form, but also the table of the answers that form the information, right? So that was one of my first questions, and I guess my manager was like, well, we had to figure something out. But yeah, I guess one of the first thing will be to limit the user on what he can do. Maybe he can just create one form, and once it's created, that's it. You either delete that one or you create a new one. You cannot edit it. I don't know.
Yeah, but would that be appropriate? Like, wouldn't that be making? So is that the case, that there are forms that you can say, no, once there's data in there, it will never change? Because I would think that most forms, they would have to be like, well, I'm open to the possibility. And for those people, you'd have to say, well, fine, then you can't use the system you created. In which case, the question coming back to you will be like, well, why did you create the system then if nobody could use it? Right? Does that not make sense?
Yeah, but I noticed that most of the forms or tools that we create, they usually don't get updated on terms of questions, like for a significant amount of time. So it might be an option, but again, it's just one of the issues.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me again, how is that the data that is collected through these forms, how is that data used?
Well, they mostly they use them for either metrics to show metrics or for audits. That's at least the cases I've seen.
Okay. And metrics would be mostly like counting, for example, how many people answered yes versus no, that kind of thing.
Yeah, mostly like charts and your pie charts and stuff like that, showing like how many devices, for example, how many devices have been um, having like What's a good example? How many devices have been down, for example, in the last month? That could be one of the questions. And they can use that data for a metric on this tool on this website, or a metric another one, or both. So it's not just like for one, but it could be used for many other metrics.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm thinking like for the main metrics, like, counting things or averaging things, those shouldn't be too hard, right? So when you when you first said form builder, my mind went different ways actually, because yeah, I have worked on a number of different apps that we had to like create dynamic forms for different kinds of reasons. But specifically, the type of form builder that we're talking about here is questionnaires, right? It's not just any kind of form to gather data, it's questionnaires, right? Just to put a little more context around it. And I think the one thing I don't think I don't remember if George touched on it, but it's also like validation, right? Because there are certain questions that you ask that you may want to validate and make sure that it's the user only selects from a list of possible options and things like that. I remember I've done something similar in a number of apps where yeah we allow the user to it's not different from like Google Forms, for example, where you say, okay, I need a question that the user is going to either give me a short response or a long response, whether it's going to be a true or false, or whether it's going to be from a list of selections, maybe like 5 selections, as opposed to which could be like just a checkered list or checkbox list, as opposed to like a drop down, or maybe if the list could have like 100 options, then we choose to use a drop down. From the user's perspective, the user designing the form, we wouldn't let the user tell drop down, I want a checkbox. No, they would go based on the type of question being asked, because then the engine that would render that form could key off of that and say, well, if the guy's trying to collect a yes no type of question, then I can make the decision whether I want checkboxes, whether I want a drop down that has only 2 options, yes or no. So it gives a little bit of flexibility for handling that. That's one aspect. Also, the grouping, like George said, maybe you want to have certain fields in the same line, street address, city, state type of thing. So giving some sort of hints as the user is building those forms. And then based on, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You totally do that. I would recommend considering, like, if you're saying, like, okay, I want something similar to Google Forms, right? First of all, spend some time with Google Forms. It's very limited. And keep in mind, it's not putting its output in a database. It's dumping it to a spreadsheet, which is pretty formless.
Yes.
So that's really more akin to just sticking it in a JSON document with like a couple other features in it. But then the other thing is consider how much effort has probably gone into building Google Forms. Are you willing to put in that much effort? And the answer is almost certainly not, because it was definitely the product of dozens of developers over years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I want to make sure that people are aware of the context. So you have to like keep narrowing the problem, because even something saying like, yeah, something simple as saying, oh, we'll just use Google Forms. Like my answer is like, cool, just embed Google Forms in your page then. And then you parse the spreadsheet that it creates and pull out your data and do that stuff. But yeah. Because it's, or if you want to pay for something, pay for Wufoo, which is a whole company like that has a form builder that does it, and you can pull it in as a component and stuff like that. But if you don't pay for
the
that,
name?
Wufoo, WUFOO. I mean, hopefully they're still around. It's been a while. But yeah, like if it's like there is no play. If you're saying I don't want a narrow scope, and I don't want to pay for it off the shelf, and I don't want to, then you have to spend at least as much effort into building it as they did. Maybe it'll be a little easier because they've created some open source tools in the process, but it won't be much easier, right? It just won't be. Yeah, that looks familiar, Jose. So yeah, that's just something to consider there. Now I will say, like, if you want something like a poll where people can design their own questions and see who, how many people click on that, that's much easier. I mean, you can do that in like a few dozen lines of code, but that's again limiting the scope of the problem. You can't do that much things in a poll, in like a Slack poll. That's the entire point. So I'd be careful. Now, there are some solutions to this problem, I would say, but it requires being really smart. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Claudio. Do you want to finish your thought?
No, I think that's cool. And the other thing that I got that got me thinking is the whole, how to store it. And we were talking about tables and tables. What prevents us from using like a document database, for example, and store each result set as a document? That's why I asked, how is the data being used? Because there was one app, at least that I've worked on, where once people had filled out like this questionnaire type of thing, nobody would ever go in and change responses. It's like, you fill out the form, you hand it away, and nobody will ever go back to fix it. So as soon as those forms enter the system, we had something that would go through that data, process that data once, and that's it. It would update the metrics, right? So it was a background job that would read the data, update the metrics and all that, produce the charts and that. So, but then again, that's why I said, how is the data being used?
Yeah. So, and I would say, like, you don't have to go to document database there. Every relational database has a way of just storing like JSON data. SQL Server, you would just put in a string and then query it using JSON properties. Postgres has a very, very good JSON type. Oracle, I'm sure they have a thing where you can send them a check for $1 million and then they suddenly enable JSON for you. That's how they work.
Right.
That sort of thing, like that does exist, but it becomes an issue of, okay, how do you query this data? Right. Because if you need to join with this data from other places, you're in trouble then, right? You're better off, okay, just storing the data and then sending out events on like a service bus about the fact that this data was created and now other applications are listening to a service bus and they can update themselves. And if you could do that, great, that works really well. But that needs much, much deeper buy-in from the organization, right? Everyone has to be on board with hooking up to a service bus and getting events from it and doing authentication on that level and have a whole monitoring team for the service bus and so on. And like and then again, the problem then becomes is, well, what happens as stuff changes, right? So if you're previously storing and had like 4 questions on it, and now you deleted one of the questions and then added 2 others, right? Any document stored after that point in time will have different properties than the one stored before that point in time. So if anyone's just using SQL properties and querying into that database, assuming those properties will always be there, they're wrong. Because sometimes 10 years back, that question wasn't in there. So you run into those issues and you kind of have to compensate for them and adjust for them. And again, the service bus option solves that because you really are just pushing it onto those applications to do it. Otherwise, this is just a wall you're going to hit over and over and over again, unfortunately. And that's fine. You can deal with it, but it might, depending on what you need this for, that might limit your abilities, right?
Yeah.
Can some of the, so there's a question, can some of the data gathering be automated? Oh, it disappeared. Can some of the data gathering be automated and pushed into Grafana, Prometheus? Do you already have a matrix analyst? John, I do not know what Grafana or Prometheus are. Do you want to just open your mic and tell us?
I was going to ask the same question.
Oh. yeah, I don't think we know.
Okay.
But I mean, like, yeah, I think, but yeah, putting it for metrics and analysis. Yeah, I don't know. I guess. And by the way, anyone else, feel free to like, oh, elk stack stuff. Yeah. Anyone else, feel free to like open up your mic and talk. This is in no way intended to be a Claudio and George show. Yeah, if you even if you want to like switch a subject or something, we could, we can figure out a way to like work that in. But yeah, okay. So metrics are in Tableau, and yeah, that totally works. But again, like that is dictating to everyone else how the data will be structured, and that's actually in most orgs, that's a big buy-in to get from every single team. Then okay, your data that you're depending on, I know you're used to it being in these tables that structure like this. Well, we're gonna go to this other thing. That's every single team in that organization is going to be again having a problem with that, or wanting tweaks to that, or wanting customizations, or wanting input. Like it's just a heavy lift especially if you're trying to do, make this move from the middle as opposed to like from the top or from the bottom, right? Just organizationally, like that's really difficult. So I do want to kind of talk about like the out for this is to go to components, in my opinion, rather than form builders. So you don't ditch the programming language and try to make your own form builder. You say, okay, the web framework that we're using, the programming language you're using, this is already a tool for building forms, right? I mean, it's the web. That's what the web, that was like half the purpose of the web to begin with. The other half was, all the linking of data, of documents. But I think from version 1.0 is when forms were introduced. Like it was right in the beginning. So that is absolutely a part of it. The issue is more, so you're not saying that the language isn't good enough to create forms, because it is. It sounds like the issue would be, you start analyzing the issue from the point of view like, all right, well, do we have the wrong primitives in order to build these forms? For example, well, all text data, like every single time we have to wire up a form, we have to put you want a text field and drop it on the component. You go ahead and you say, all right, well, I'm going to put this text field in there, and then, but I need a label for it, so I need to put in a label element, and then I need some text in there, and we need to actually have it be internationalizable. So it's going to call to our localization library in order to translate that text. And then, we need some common validation flags. All validations need to be displayed in a common way, and the labeling has to be displayed in a common way, and the ARIA properties on there have to be positioned properly. And it's just a lot of stuff that people are doing over and over again. And in that case, you say, okay, well, can we write a component that people can just put in their application, and the component standardize all of those things? Now, it doesn't wire anything from that. It's just removing all the duplicate stuff that actually is standardized across a company, right? And I think that that's really good out. You start with that just on the UI layer, and how specifically you do that. I mean, you could do that. The whole big reason I like React is because it makes doing that stupid simple. But there's no web framework in which you can't do stuff like that. You know, I think, Jose, you're still in web forms, right? Mostly? Or are you moving
Yeah,
to?
we're still using web forms.
Yeah, so with web forms, I mean, web forms had a very, very good componentization architecture, actually. Like, it wasn't as slick as React, like, it still requires a lot of work to do it, to create a component. Once you do create a component, there's a lot you could do with it. It just, you probably have to, like, dig deep and, like, learn a lot more about how, you know, the page lifecycle, about how all that works with components and how to debug them and stuff like that. But I think you can do it, absolutely. And really, you just start at the UI layer, so people are going to install your component library, and then they're going to be able to just grab your text input component and put it on the page. And here are all the options on how to do the text input stuff. And if you don't support one of those options, they can still do it the old way too. But in that case, it's on them to make it compliant with the you know, with all the things that the business mandates, and here it is written out exactly what we expect from you. And by doing all that, and then again, you could start to build that out. Now, if you do that, then you're still, most validation, you're still leaving up to the user, which is probably what you want. I mean, maybe you could make the component have a little bit of a validation stuff on the back end. I mean, but I would keep it very, very lightweight. How to actually, but most validation they're still doing with their programming language. You just giving them guidance on where to put that stuff, which you could do in documentation or yet another component, like a validated form component or something like that. Or it's still up to them how exactly they're going to store it in a database, which I would argue is what you want, but you could provide them with a piece that plugs in really well with that. And if they use that one piece, then it just throws it into a single column, JSON column in the database, right? And that way, well, they can use your thing if they don't need any of those features, but like a main central use case that you're planning from the very beginning and writing tests against is when they don't use your component and they're just doing it themselves. So again, that's not so much building up a form builder framework so much as a bunch of components that standardize what your company's form look like and how they work, as well as some written down guidance on how to write these forms. I think that sort of thing does help and does end up being pretty flexible.
Yeah, I think for now, just gonna try to explain because that was my initial question to you. How hard could a project like that be? So I was start off by telling my manager that it will take a lot of work. At least it will be something that may not be worth
It might not be worth,
investing on.
but really, I would analyze specific cases. If there's specific thing, if the thing that we want, like you said, is like the equivalent of like a poll in Slack, yeah, that's easy to do. If what we want is like, what are the problems you're having? If the problems are that all the forms look different, then just some written down guidance in a common style sheet will do it, right? So, but and that's not hard to do. I mean, it's kind of hard because you have to write down guidance in a way people understand. But beyond that, you're just creating a style sheet and like some guidance on how to use it, and that solves that problem. But like, I think it doesn't have to be hard. It's just a matter of what problem you're solving, because solving the problem of we need to build forms in a standard way is in some way saying, well, the problem is half of web development, right? like that's not specific enough to be a thing you can try and solve. Right. So I would encourage doing that. Like really try to drill down and figure out what you can do and drill down further.
That's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Interesting problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on that? Anything they want to talk about? All right. Well, yeah. Does anyone have another topic that they'd like to bring up? All right. Hey, I took a job.
You did?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I am going to be a principal developer at a company called Aunt Bertha. They are, so it's I think findhelp.org. They are from mostly what I understand, it's a social services search engine. So people are, if you need services, social services of specific sort, you can use it to find government programs, charities, NGOs that are helping you. And like the way they work is, for example, anyone can use it, but also the product gets licensed by companies that want to integrate it into their products. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm going to start that toward the end of February.
Congrats.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right.
Yeah. What was that?
I said nice, George.
Yeah. I'm excited. Like it has been a really long time. Actually, I've never worked at a product company. I worked at one company where, we were an industry product where we had a company where we had some product that supported, our operations. I've done that, and I've done a ton of consulting for other people, building products for them to use and for them to sell. But I've never actually worked at a company that had like a product that they were building and selling directly. So there's a whole range of different challenges that I think are going to come with that, and as well as opportunities that I'm interested in. Yeah, should be cool.
Nice. Yeah, well, let us know about your journey.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. What else? What else is cooking?
Are you, so you said improving is hiring. Are you actually involved in the hiring process?
I do help with some of the interviews, yes.
How's that going?
I haven't actually. What was that?
I said, how's that going? Is there any particular insights you've, so far in the process?
It's fun that like the openings came up maybe 2 weeks ago, and since I've been like up to my eyeballs, I didn't catch any interviews yet. So that's yeah, I haven't been a part of that process just yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we try to balance things out because so we have like a pool of interviewers and just like spread it out, and then whenever like whoever's an interviewer, if they're going through like some busy times with the clients and stuff, we just say, all right, I'm not available the next couple of weeks or however long for interviews and things like that.
Okay.
That's been my case.
Like at all.
Yeah, the last 2 weeks just been full with meetings and just client work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been productive. Last 2 weeks or so, I've been mostly working on doing some cleanup and refactoring unit tests and integration tests in the C# space. Because I saw like the code base growing there and started identifying some patterns that's like, all right, let me take a step back, let me help the guys clean up that code just to make it easier, because it's like we're figuring certain parts of the software out. So it's like, okay, let's just throw things at the wall and see what works. And then as we started to see that stabilize, like, okay, that's the approach that we want to go. So then I know that the newer features will be built on top of that. So I want to make sure that the way we're writing the tests, it's pretty easy to understand what's going on, and it's easy to write new tests, like just building some little methods here and there that you can just say, your givens are always the same. You're saying, given the user has this permission, right? Or, then the user has access denied or access granted. Like some of the things that I keep seeing repeating in a bunch of tests, I don't want to see the same code written over and over, right? To perform the same assertions and the same setups and things like that. That's been keeping me busy the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, bad. No. But you are mostly C#, right?
The last 2 weeks, yeah. Prior to that, I spent like maybe 2 or 3 months, mostly in like Cypress.io, with TypeScript, testing the Angular part of the project, which has been interesting. Which is, again, how do I apply everything that I've learned as far as like how to write better tests to Cypress.io end-to-end tests, right? Mm-hmm. How can I leverage that kind of thing? Because I think I'm every on the web, Cypress.io, same thing. It's always like lots of setup, the assertions that are very verbose, and like, nah, there's a better way to do that. There's got to be a better way. If there isn't one, we just create one.
Yeah. I wonder. I say that I've been doing project right now, and I've done something before, and I've TypeScript for a long time. So
you're breaking up a little. Like every 2 words, I'm hearing you dropping.
Guy.
Okay.
Am I still breaking up? Yep. All right. Just keep going.
Oh no, that was a little better.
Okay. See you later, Mike. Yeah. So, and next time bring something I want to talk about.
Yeah, now I can hear you well.
Okay. So TypeScript has been driving me up the wall lately. That's what I'm trying to say.
What are you trying to do to it?
Like, honestly, just use it in a normal way. And I feel like I know every single day I sit down with it, I try to do something, and I run face first into some limitation of the type system. It's so frustrating. Just on a plain level, like the conflict between JSX syntax and generics syntax is a nightmare.
That's something I had not tried. So doing React with TypeScript is not something I tried before.
Yeah, because it's both angle brackets, and you have to be very, very careful about the syntax you write. And sometimes it actually forces you to use different language features. There's certain things like you can't do with Lambda methods. It's like, yeah, but that's a different feature. I mean, I can figure out a way to make it work with function declaration syntax, but it does do subtly different things. And all that just because of this syntax conflict. It's ridiculous. Like, this is bad enough that in some cases that I like if I was on the TypeScript team, I would have been like, we just don't support JSX syntax. We're not going to do it. They can do something else. It's that bad, in my opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the tooling just tends to fall down with it a lot. And then just in general, so like some of the type implementations, like I'm not a fan of type hierarchies. So I see the typed alias mechanism in TypeScript, and I get really excited because, like, yeah, you can do pretty much everything by just composing types, right? It's a really, really good system. But the fact that you have that and type hierarchies kind of makes them that they fight each other. Like, so for example, I would expect that I could do, all right, I want a type for all strings that are not empty, right? So you would think I could use the except helper type. So string except string comma empty string, right? Because you could do that with anything else. You could do you know, you could have a type that's like A or B or C or D or E and like a bunch of those, and do that except that or empty string, and it'll give you all of those that are not empty strings, and you type. But you can't do that with string, because string is internally not modeled as a type union of all strings, of all possible strings. And that sort of stuff drives me batty, right? Because no, string's not that. It's like this primitive, it's this concept that all the other ones are kind of instances of. And it really, really breaks down when you're trying to like build like a nice type system for your application that's flexible, and you just get slapped in the wrist constantly. Or like, yeah, like all the situation. Like here's one I ran into the other day. So I have an array of things. So like I have an array of IDs, and I have another array of objects, and for each one of those IDs, I have to find the correlating object from that array, right? And then do something with it. So, you know, you do like, you know, take the array of ID and map it, and and for each one of those IDs, find the corresponding object which has a matching ID. So use the dot find method. Well, the find method on an array could return undefined, right? Because it might be empty. So then so you really need to filter those out. So you do dot map and then do dot filter Boolean to make sure which will, you know, filter for only the truthy values, and then you do dot map again to do all the things with the object, and it won't work because the type system hasn't picked up the fact that after that filter runs, this object can no longer be undefined. So now, and there is no way in the syntax to say this parameter will not be undefined. Now you could do it in the usage. You could do like, you could put an exclamation point when you use it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing a bunch of stuff, if you're grabbing a bunch of properties from that object, that's a real big problem, because you're just repeating yourself over and over and over again. So there are ways around it. Like what you could do is use their, I think, property type guard clause or something like that, and you create a custom filtering function. So rather than doing something like a built-in function like Boolean, or rather than doing something like, you know, the identity function x arrow x, you have to create like your own custom exist function, which guarantees that anything path coming out of it is not null. And that will work, and you could kind of do it. But you need some really kind of like advanced level understanding of this stuff to write that. And it's super frustrating because you have to write a function for something that's already in the lane. It's already in the standard library even, and it just doesn't work in that way. Like, so like every single, like I've been tracking it. It's been like about 7 days, and every single day I've started doing something in TypeScript and just face first into some typing problem. I'm like, it does not work.
Oh man.
So I get frustrated by it. I mean, it's helped me catch some errors. I don't think it's actually saved me any time in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Now that doesn't mean that there isn't good use for it and it won't save time for other people in other situations. But man.
Yeah, you know, like 2 years ago when I was on a React project, and you know, the team was like always falling into traps where it's like, oh man, if we had a type system, we would not have had that bug. right? That kind of stuff. And then so one of our guys tried to use TypeScript back then, but after like a week of playing with it, he said, you know what, no, the kind of advantage it's not gonna actually make it worth, because like you said, the tooling and then setting up, it was a large project, several developers, and many teams also using the same code base. It's like, nah, too much. It's not gonna, we cannot, get that through like that.
Yeah. And I don't know. It can be good. I'm sure it can be. But I get really frustrated on it. I think part of it is that the type system almost but not quite works the way that I want a type system to work. And then on top of that, there's just like lots of like really weird or ambiguous syntax. The whole type guard thing is, was it called type guard or property guard? Let me remember.
I don't know. Yeah, those things are way,
I think
way beyond the things that I know about.
I think, yeah, they're called type predicates. Like that to me is such a weird thing for a language to like. It's just weird. It's weird for them to. Here, I'll show what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. So this feature right here. So in this case, you're creating a function where you're saying that, and this is like implicit to the language from the fact that you use an is right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like normally this syntax is used like after the function declaration colon, that's used to say this is the return type. So this function, first of all, if you're doing it this way, and the function returns a Boolean, so it's implicit the fact that it returns a Boolean. But then if it returns true, then you are guaranteeing that the parameter into it matches this, is a fish. And the entire point of that, I get it, it's to allow stuff like this right here. So you could do like if is fish, and now it knows that within that block, pet is a fish. But how freaking weird is that? It's a type guard using in the place where you write return stuff about the return type, that's actually defining things about the parameter into it. And also it never actually states the return type, which is implicitly Boolean. And then also try to write this with an arrow function, which you can do. I do think it's doable now. There was a bug before where it would just like blow up. Which, by the way, like, why the heck are arrow functions not like a number one thing? Like that should be like, why is anyone doing stuff with not arrow functions in TypeScript? It's been around for long enough. What are we doing? Const is, so we do is fish. Like no one needs that. So I think this will work right now. And then you do, let's see, arrow. You need to do type fish. Oh no, that's not gonna work. Type fish. Let's say this. Okay. So yeah, this will work right now. But look at how this gets if like you start adding generics to it, right? Okay. So let's do well, it's not going to be fish or a bird, but there's actually going to be a third one that is going to be defined by the generic. So or T, and then you're doing T, and then you want to say, well, T can be anything that extends verb. So not exactly verb, but anything that's a type bird. And then maybe we could get rid of that. And then you could do, well, maybe there needs to be async as well. And like, look at this absurd signature, and now that's an error for some reason. Oh yeah, because now it's a promise Boolean, not a regular Boolean. What the heck?
Yeah.
like this is just you just building up more and more and more stuff, and you're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like constantly just running face first into stuff like that. I'm like, oh my god. And like this whole feature is just drives me nuts. I get it, it's useful, but it's so weird and seems like not a good way to solve any problem.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. I wonder, is there any
Mhm.
research out there that shows like the percentage of people doing React, with JavaScript versus TypeScript? I wonder what that proportion would be.
Oh. Yeah. I mean, it's got. I would be surprised if it's more than 15% TypeScript, because like I think the entire world of like WordPress developers and stuff like that, they're not pulling in TypeScript. That would be dumb. Like the only people really using TypeScript are the ones like, who are on application code or library code that's oversized and matters. And like they're not, I don't know. That's not most applications to begin with. Now, if you go by lines of code, maybe it's more than 15%. But I would very much doubt by people it's that high.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Cool. All right, we're at minutes. Anyone else have stuff they want to talk about?
Everybody's so quiet.
Yeah.
Just keep waiting for us to, make fools of ourselves. Camera mic. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're all welcome.
Yeah.
Just in terms of how we run this, like if anybody wants to come with questions like Jose did today, or if anybody has, anything that they want to introduce, talk about. I mean, the way that I got involved in this meeting 12 years ago or something, 13 years ago now, was, that I was just like a lonely developer at a company and just wanted to be like, here's the stuff I'm thinking about trying, and like Claudia and then would be like, no, don't do that. That's stupid. So, but like it generates good conversations, and that's how we learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always bring that up because, like, even though I remember at the time I used to promote, at the company I worked at the time, oh, let's get together, on lunch breaks and share stuff. Usually I was the only one sharing, even though there were like, I don't know, 10 people in the room. I would only be the only one actually doing the talk, and it didn't seem like, many people were actually getting anything out of it. So it's like, well, let's bring it online. Maybe we can, gather some more people who are interested in sharing stuff and just having a chat like this. So,
Yeah.
good deal. Oh, by the way, I guess I can wrap up. This year, I decided to follow this practice of, I see that is so good. I'm just starting to move into the field, so doing lots of listening and reading and quietly participating. So hopefully participate more soon. Absolutely. And I remember, thanks Jeremy for expressing that. I remember in the previous runs that we've had of the VBB, it has happened where we had some folks who would join in for sometimes like a couple of months in a row, and eventually they would like come out and start sharing things over time as they became comfortable with the group and everything. So yeah, take your time, man. By all means.
Yeah, I personally feel like I don't have much to share yet. I mean, I'm a new developer, but I'm joining whenever I can and at least listening. And maybe if I have something to say, I'll say it. But yeah, getting more into this as well. I try to at least have, because I'm used to the Slack channel, right? When I met George, I was trying to have something like that using Teams on my team, but they were not very excited about it. So we really don't just sit down and talk about just, software development in general. Whenever we have a call, it's about a specific issue for a specific tool that we're working on.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, totally. Recommendation I always give people, because I always hear, oh, I'm just a beginner. I don't have a lot to share. You have questions to share, right? So please do. Like, if you're going through things and you think, oh, this is just so simple, why would I ask that question? By all means, right? Because, we all get to work with folks who are just entering the field, starting to learn. And sometimes after you've been doing something for a long time, you start taking things for granted, which is dangerous, right? Because now you switch teams and you're working with, new folks who are also getting, into the field, and, they don't know about certain things, technologies, what have you. So it's good to be, reminded of, okay, these are questions that do come up, and we should have a good way to help out folks. So yeah, never feel shy to, ask questions, man.
I will. It's helpful for us too, because we don't really remember what it was like to be beginners, but also being a beginner now is very different from being a beginner when I started. I didn't have to worry about web frameworks. I had to worry about browser inconsistencies. I didn't have to worry about microservices. I had to worry about figuring out how to freaking SSH into somewhere, or how to get an FTP thing server running. I have to deal with different stuff, and a lot of stuff that people who are new are probably struggling with is I'm blind to, because it all came up on me very slowly. Yeah, I kind of get the basics of Docker, because I read their front page and I was like, yeah, okay, I get how that would work. But that's not the same position as someone who's just landing in it and be like, I don't understand what the heck this is for, why, and so on. So those questions are valuable for us because it also helps us understand the frame of mind, the people we work with and interact with.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. All right, guess time to wrap things up. Thanks, guys. That was good stuff.
Yep.
Very cool. All right, you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Yep. Thanks, Jeremy. You all have a great day, and I hope to see you back next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Welcome.